Welcome to the Advantage Podcast, a monthly unscripted conversation with host David Ashcraft and top leaders impacting our world. Created by pastors for pastors to strengthen our leadership and expand our knowledge and influence. Well, hello and welcome to the Advantage Podcast. I'm Andy Martin, part of the team here at the Advantage, and I've got the privilege and the honor to introduce you guys to Steve Cuss. And you may have already heard of him. You may be reading his books, but Steve is the author of Managing Leadership Anxiety, The Expectation Gap, creator of Capable Life, and probably the best website I've ever seen, stevecusswords.com. I love that. So hello, Steve. Welcome to the group.
Andy, great to be with you. Thanks.
So I'm excited generally to have you on because I came across your material when you were on John Ortberg's Become New.com, his podcast. And I'm a big fan of that, devoured that for the last 2.5 years and kept seeing you on there. And that prompted me to go get the books. And then I drive across Pennsylvania a lot. So you've been my partner driving across Pennsylvania numerous times. So thank you for that. Listening to the books, devoured those, went back to the podcast, and now currently working through your Being Human podcast. Which is excellent. So great job. Thank you. That's how I got acquainted with you. And then we actually got to bring you out to LCBC and you did a workshop for a lot of our leadership team. That was a great day. Thank you for
doing what a phenomenal church too. Yeah, that was the thing that struck me about LCBC is how much you enjoy campuses. A lot of churches doing multi-site really struggle, and you guys embrace it and love it. That was a great experience for me.
You got to be with all of our campus pastors, didn't you?
I did, yeah. And then while I was in Lancaster, I went from LCBC to a wonderful Mennonite community. So I really got a good taste of Lancaster culture.
You got the whole smorgasbord, so to speak.
It was great. Yeah, what a great part of the country. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, why don't you do a background on us? Who is Steve Cuss? Where are you from? And tell us your Jesus story. Tell us, just pastor of a church. Where was that at? Just give me some background on Steve.
Sure. Yeah. So born and raised West Australian. So that's my species. People wondering, what species is this guy? I'm an Aussie. Born and raised in Perth. Perth is the most isolated city in the world. It's right on the western edge of Australia. Most Aussies live on the East Coast. And grew up completely unchurched. And my very brief testimony would be I was a very typical, boring suburban kid. Never got into trouble, never caused any trouble. But I knew I was lost. I felt as lost as you could feel. Home was not a safe place. School was not a safe place. And my oldest sister had become a follower of Jesus about a year or maybe a couple of years before me. Wow. A kid in high school, actually the preacher's daughter of a local Church of Christ, Elaine, her name was. She was this unbelievable, kind soul, gifted evangelist. She starts bringing all her friends to youth group. And then my sister was one of her friends, and then they brought their younger siblings.
Oh, wow.
So I got dragged along when I was 13. And, Andy, I couldn't say it this way at the time, but I walked into this little fundamentalist, legalistic church, welcoming church, and my soul relaxed. I just felt like I didn't have to put up a guard, a pretense. I mean, I had a lot of pretense and guard and fear, but as a teenager, but it was a fully welcoming place. I'm in my 50s now. And what was unique about this church is it was a lot of people 60 and older, and then a ton of teenagers. We had a youth group of about 30. So the church was like 100, 120 people.
Yeah. 2/3
of us were like 60 and above. 1/3 of us were teenagers. We had 2 middle-aged families, 2 families in their 40s. And so it was this very old and very young together. And I went back there last year in my early 50s, and I walk in the door, and Dot, who has to be 90 now, looks at me and says, "I remember you."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "I remember you too, Dot." Like these people were incredibly welcoming to us pretty lost kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jesus, changed my life in the most profound ways. And I felt a call to ministry, and then I moved to America for theology, for my Bible college education. I can go from there, but I'll stop and
Yeah.
see what you want to chase.
That's pretty amazing to go back and meet Dot. That's pretty grounding, isn't it?
It was really moving. Yeah. I mean, this was
That's cool.
really, I mean, honestly, Andy, my first experience with love was in a local church.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. It's a good reminder for us. Just, who are we being?
Oh,
Um,
man. Yeah.
so then, and you're in Denver now, right?
Yes.
Outside of
Denver
Denver.
area. Yep.
Did you plant a church there, or how did that go?
I stepped in after the planter left. So the church that I stepped in on had been going 5 years,
Okay.
and I was the second lead pastor in there. Before that, I was at a massive church in Las Vegas, Central Christian Church,
Okay.
and I was a
Wow.
crisis intervention pastor there.
Really?
So I went from this huge church where we had a graphic design department and I had a catering team, and then went to this little church plant that met in a elementary cafeteria. I became the photocopy tech, the plumber, you know how it is.
Everything. That's right.
So yeah, both really good experiences.
Well, that helps. That helps me get a better understanding of your background. It helps our pastors too. I mean, you're singing their song. That story's been repeated a lot of times in our group. So
Oh,
good to
I
know.
think lead pastoring is blue collar work. And in fact, it was a big philosophy of mine because I pastor in a white collar town. Lots of tech professionals, lots of brilliant intellectuals that I don't mean to say this cynically, but they sit behind a desk and they have an idea, but someone else implements it.
Right.
And a lot of those people were part of my church and they would come to me with an idea, expecting me to implement it as the pastor. And I was always looking for blue collar minded people. If you're willing to roll up your sleeves and sweat with us, you can be a leader at my church.
Oh, there you
And I
go.
got some flack in the early days of being a lead pastor because some of our white collar people get paid a lot of money to troubleshoot and tell you what's wrong with your thing, like software engineers or
Yeah.
even like we have rocket scientists in our church.
Yeah.
And I just kept saying, well, Sunday morning, 7 a.m., that's leadership. Come and stack some chairs, unload some carts in our portable church. That's how you become an elder at our church. So
Yeah.
I'm a big
Okay,
fan of blue collar shepherding.
there you go. Yeah, I understand that and agree with it a lot. So the thing I'm excited about introducing you to our pastors is your material, I think, is just so applicable and approachable. We could use it. I could use it daily as I lead teams, as I lead coworkers at the church, neighbors, family, and myself. I mean, it's been very life giving to go through both books and your podcast. So thank you for that. I'm
Yeah.
excited about that. And so what we'll do is we'll probably start broad, but then there's some. I want to towards the end of it. I want to get to some challenging statements that you've given over the time. It's like I think our pastors would appreciate this. Burnout isn't about workload, and that was a fun conversation that I heard you do.
Yeah.
And why just be like Jesus isn't really the goal. that
Yeah.
was interesting. And
Yeah.
why Jesus may not be your core belief. And
Great.
that I had to swerve a little bit when I was driving and heard that one. So I was like, that was good.
Yeah.
So let's just start broad. What is leadership anxiety? What is anxiety? What are you talking about?
Yeah. Good. Yeah. It probably helped for people who aren't familiar with me. A lot of the work that I now do really started when I was a trauma chaplain. So I went to Bible college. I got a 4 year degree in Bible and preaching, and then I was a local urban hospital chaplain.
Mm,
Um, and just in the way that medical students do a medical residency, almost every urban teaching hospital has a chaplain residency program, and it's for ministry students. So
yeah.
if you are in ministry, and in some Catholic and Methodist and some of the larger mainline denominations, they require their ministry students to go through this chaplain residency. And that's what I did. I did it for a year. And just like, if you watch hospital dramas, you see the medical residents doing those big long shifts. We do too. I did 28-hour overnight shifts and it was really intense. I bring all that up, Andy, because they are the ones that introduced me to my anxiety, the chaplains. Because you take a young ministry student who has a head full of Bible
Yeah.
and you place that man or woman in a room of death. And
Mm,
the impulse I think when you're young with a Bible degree, you're so excited to preach and to share what you know. The impulse is to say something, right? To quote the
Yeah.
scripture or do the right thing to lower people's anxiety. And chaplaincy is all about restraint. It's all about noticing your desire to say something and quelling that desire so that you can be present to people in their suffering. It's an exactly opposite skill from preaching, leading.
Yeah.
And I think, Andy, I mean, I was 24 when I did that. It was back in the 90s. And that's where I first discovered that all of the things that I thought were assets in ministry might also be a liability.
Hmm.
Um, so, yes, it's very good to know the Bible and it's very good to have a Bible verse at the ready. But if I anxiously need to give you a Bible verse, I'm no longer able to read what the situation requires. I'm just so used to leading. I work with a lot of leaders that don't realize that their leadership strength is a coping mechanism. And
Uh,
it is also a contribution to God's kingdom. It's not one or the other, but it's like this autopilot that we tend to fall into, like ruts in the road. So when I talk about leadership anxiety, I'm talking about reactivity. I'm talking about our habits and coping mechanisms that get us into trouble sometimes.
right.
I'm talking about um, the our false needs, the need to have the answer, the need to know what to do, the need to make you like me. These are all false needs. So
Right.
anxiety is a big word. I specialize in a very particular type of anxiety known as reactivity, and
Okay.
it's always based on something false. It's never based on something real. So, for example, when I'm in Western Australia and I see the tail of a reptile when I'm out walking, that's real. that's that's a real, like my heart's racing because there's a real threat. But when somebody comes down after I preach and they're critical of me, and I have a false need to people please,
Mhm.
my body acts the same way. My body gives me a little adrenal response, acting as if that criticism has me in danger when I'm in no danger at all. So,
It's
yeah, the idea that leadership, um, burnout has to do with false needs rather
do
than workload.
do you think that everybody has that list of you? I think there were, you said five false beliefs or five false gospels. I mean, you said leadership anxiety, but really it's pretty much everybody, right?
Every human has false needs. And there's two distinctives about reactivity that would help people. One is it's always based on something false. So, therefore, I think the gospel has a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
So, my false need to be impressive, my false need to be right, to be understood. When I'm with a critic, like a harsh bully type critic, and they're willfully misunderstanding me, I try to explain myself more. Like it gets crazy. It's not helpful, but that's because I have to have you understand me for me to be okay. So false needs is one thing. The other thing about reactivity is it's the only anxiety that's contagious.
Ah,
There's no other kind of anxiety that's contagious. So trauma is a form of anxiety. It's not contagious. I can be with a traumatized person and I won't be traumatized.
hmm.
Now, if a leader can understand and work at the level of stopping contagious anxiety, every leader I know has noticed this. The elder that is harsh, that shuts the group down, the staff that have their own secret meetings after the meetings, like we're all catching and spreading reactivity to each other. And it's forming these behaviors in us and our teams that are not healthy.
Wow. That's I was listening to your book and you were saying sharing that, and it's like, oh my gosh, I've seen that. It the memories start racing in your head. I've seen that.
Right.
I've done that.
Right. That's right.
Been a
Yeah.
part of that so much. Would you mind going through the five things? I've got the list, so you know them, but unpack that a bit. So the need, the false gospel or false belief of have to be in control.
Yeah, we call it the big five. So not everybody, so I'll name all five, but not everybody's all five. But trying to help people find themselves in these categories. Because, the idea of false needs, people are like, well, where do I even begin? Well, you could begin by locating yourself in the big five. So control, I'll name them and then we can get into them. The first one's control, then the second one is perfection. The third one is having the answer.
Yeah.
The fourth one is having to be there for people when they're hurting. The fifth one is approval.
Hmm.
And we can dig into all five or any of the five. If we just pick two for now,
Yeah.
perfection. Like some of your audience, Andy, are slaves to perfection. They really do believe the false gospel that even though they've never done it before, the first time they ever do something, the minimum standard of behavior is expert.
Yeah.
A classic perfectionist does not give themselves, there you go. So you're one of those. So let's try this, Andy. So first of all, classic perfectionist doesn't give themselves permission to be a rookie,
Right.
which is a normal human thing. Andy, what's it like for you in your body when you make a mistake that affects another person?
Oh, yeah, that shows. But even before that, if there's the chance that I can look foolish, oh, I won't do it. I'll avoid it. I'll avoid whatever it is. I won't go do it. And yeah, I've seen that over various periods of things. Not trying a sport, not trying an activity, just because I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing.
That's a typical perfectionist. If you know you can't shine, you don't even opt in. That's quite a common situation. What about when someone compliments your work and they give you an A or an A minus and your heart says it's a B minus at best? What's that like for you?
I mean, typical deflection. I don't want, just no, yeah, that's God or that's whatever, and
Yeah.
try, or it's hard. It's not the easiest thing to take that compliment at times.
Okay. So then the reason a perfectionist burns out is because they can't cope with the adrenal response in their body
Hmm.
when they make a mistake that affects others, when they're doing all the mitigating that you describe. You're like, well, if I can't, I'm using my words here, Andy, but if I can't shine, I'm not even opting in.
Right.
Some perfectionists, they'll check their emails like 12 to 15 times before hitting send
Yeah.
because the gospel of perfection says to them that a mistake is Armageddon.
Hmm.
So your false needs, what they do is they tell you that the outcome is exaggerated. So for me, approval is one of my false needs.
Right.
If I disappoint someone or let them down, my body tells me Armageddon is probably just about to happen. And so all of the things that I do to keep everyone happy to avoid Armageddon, all of the things that you do to stop from making a mistake to avoid, well, God is nowhere to be found in this. We're now on a gospel of self. So
Hmm.
reactivity fundamentally is trying to get you to depend on yourself to be well instead of depending on God to be well.
Oh wow.
So we've only covered two here, but God is perfect. We don't have to be. We get to be human. God is in control. Your average control freak, a couple of signs for control freaks. Number one, you invite a control freak to a party and they'll say, I'll meet you there. I'll drive separately. Like they don't like to be trapped. They always want to have an escape mechanism. But also, you can notice a control freak in a meeting. It's not their meeting, but they're anxious about everyone's experience. You put a control freak in any room,
Oh
even if it's not their room, they will overfunction and take
yeah.
responsibility for everyone's experience. That's exhausting. So God is actually the one in control. Humans get to trust. So you start to see in these big five, there's a God-sized load and a human-sized load.
Hmm.
Theologically, the very first temptation humans were given in the Garden of Eden is you can be like God.
Hmm.
So humans are trying to take on God's load when we were never designed to, and that's why we burn out.
How many worship programmers, staff programmers, they've got this expectation of what this gathering is going to look like, and they're trying to control everybody's experience.
That's
Yeah, we
right.
craft an experience, true, but the result, that's not in our hands.
You
But
know what's interesting? When you die to these false needs, you don't become lazy, you just
mm,
become free. And so and every of these false needs has a human-sized kingdom contribution. This is where it gets kind of complicated, Andy, but like God gave us a gift. So you're a perfectionist. Well, God probably, Andy, wired you to be really good at improving something. That would be my guess, is that somebody gives you something that's like halfway there, your ability to see what can be improved and improve it and get it much further along.
yeah,
That is probably the way God wired you to contribute to God's kingdom.
right.
And you can probably, like if you and I were working together and maybe I built a website and I'm entrepreneurial and I'm already bored and moving on to the next thing. If I handed you kind of a wireframe website You probably get energized by making it better. That's human sized. That's your contribution, your worship. But I think the enemy takes your gifting and distorts it and twists it into an exaggerated God-sized load of perfectionism. So
Hmm.
your average perfectionist is a really gifted improver. Your average people pleaser is really nimble at connecting to a wide range of people. So I'm a
Wow.
people pleaser. You can put me in almost any room in almost any situation, and I can find something to talk about. I'm curious. I can connect to a broad range of people. That's
Right.
human sized. I can do that all day long and I'm energized by it. But if you take my gift and twist it into needing approval, that same nimbleness turns to like chameleon behavior where I'll actually shape shift to be okay with you.
Oh, wow.
You can kind of feel the difference there. So
Hmm.
all of the big five have a human-sized equivalent, but I think the enemy is taking our gifting and like distorting it and putting it out of reach and making us chase it and exhaust ourselves.
I've heard you say our response typically in reactivity is just what you said, human size, or we get bigger or we get smaller.
Yeah,
And that's a sign of our reaction, our reactivity. Is that a fair way to say that?
that's right. The way we cope with reactivity is we try to get bigger than human sized or smaller than human sized. So most typical leaders, we tend to get bigger. We
Mhm.
dominate the meeting. We no longer listen to learn. We're now listening to teach or correct or explain. So, it's a simple example of getting bigger is if somebody is pouring out their day and your brain as a leader is telling you how to advise them about it, they're not asking for your advice. They're just pouring out their day.
I've never
I
seen
run into this with my daughter. Like she just wants to tell me about her day. And my brain, Andy, tells me, you need to tell her how to live your day. It's crazy when saying it out loud to you now, I'm like, what is wrong with me? But that is me needing to get bigger than her complex life
Wow.
and simplify it down to a piece of advice. And at its worst, you see pastors quoting a Bible verse when it's not Bible verse time.
Wow.
I had to learn this as a chaplain. Getting
Mhm.
smaller, this is really powerful, Andy. If leaders can notice their team, some of your team stopped speaking up months ago.
Right.
They only speak up if you call on them. And even then, they may not tell you what they really think because their safety radar is telling them it is no longer safe to be yourself in this room. Somebody said something or did something, they're getting
Something's getting
smaller.
bigger. Somebody's getting bigger, so I'm going to get
Someone
smaller.
got bigger, so someone got smaller.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's really powerful if you can learn to notice people getting bigger and smaller.
So what's the solution? What's the step towards a solution?
Yeah, the solution is to be human sized. And the way you do it is you have to learn to notice anxiety habits in you and your people. It's a long journey. So for the sake of a podcast, the two most powerful tools are noticing and curiosity.
Okay.
So you take an average worship. Do you have many worship leaders who listen into this?
Yeah, sure.
Take an average worship leader, and maybe it's a Thursday night band practice, and the bass player is late, 12 minutes late, always 12 minutes late every time, puts you behind, and comes in, and the bass player might also be an Eeyore. Like everyone knows an Eeyore, like their mood comes into the room with them.
Yeah.
And suddenly the band that was kind of laughing and having a good time, everything gets a little frosty, a little chilly. Or for
Mhm.
a lead pastor, you could picture this in an elder meeting, a
Right.
board meeting. Same idea. Well, everyone catches it and spreads it unless they're noticing it. If you notice it, what's the beauty of reactivity, Andy? And please stop me if I'm getting too fast or too complicated.
Mhm.
Reactivity always forms predictable patterns between people. Always.
Really?
And
Okay.
if you can notice the predictable pattern, it's a game. I cannot say how much this is a game changer for leadership. It's usually the same elder who's a yeah butter. Yeah, but what about this? It's usually the same. It's usually the same staff member that uses the most words in every meeting.
Okay.
It's usually the same that never speak up unless they're called upon. So learning to notice the patterns so that when that bass player comes in late again, you shouldn't be surprised. And if you just notice what's going on in the bass player, how is it impacting the band's mood? But now and this is where curiosity helps. What's going on in me?
Hmm.
Oh, I know what's going on in me. My brain is telling me, you don't know what you're doing, man. You should resign. Someone smarter should be here. And I'm
Right.
no longer now worshiping. I'm now in a shame cycle.
Hmm.
In that elder meeting, what's going on? You know what's going on is I have the need to always know what to say. That was one of the big five, is to have the answer.
Right.
So that when that elder asked me that question, that's interesting, isn't it? It's actually a fair question. They can ask that question, but why am I so defensive in my reply? Why am I so combative? Why did I tell the elder that that's actually not in the elder's purview? Like, that question's not, that's not in your scope. Just focus on, is that because they asked is it really fair that a volunteer elder coming home from work,
Hmm.
shouldn't they be able to ask whatever they want? Okay, so it has more to do with my need to know the answer, and the elder has exposed that I don't know something and now I'm feeling anxious. This is a long journey,
Yeah.
but noticing. And then the deeper work is naming and diffusing. And that's what my books and podcasts are really about. This
Notice,
is a
name,
long journey.
diffuse. Yeah.
Yeah, notice, name, diffuse is the 3 steps for every leader.
And it was the noticing also, is that part of the, so now I'm really going off deeper stuff, is the
Yeah.
family systems theory that you talk about. Is that part of that framework as well? I wasn't going to get into this today.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So family systems theory is what I was taught when I was a chaplain in the 90s. And
Mhm.
it is simply the science of noticing anxiety in the room. That's all it is. And
So
what,
those noticing anxiety and those patterns and the reactivity of others, is that the
yeah,
same?
systems theory teaches you to notice predictable patterns.
Okay.
And then the notice, name, diffuse is my attempt, because the problem with systems theory is it's so vague and conceptual. I've
Hmm.
tried to make it as concrete and actionable as possible. So
Yeah.
I created the notice, name, diffuse 3-step process, but it's totally,
Yep.
I'm standing on the shoulders of a ton of systems theory experts for sure. But if a leader can walk into an elders meeting deciding to notice the anxiety, they will be less likely to catch and spread it. That's
Yeah.
kind of the magic bullet. We tend to, if we're not paying attention, that the problem with most leaders, we're so focused on mission and vision, the agenda,
Right.
whatever's on the agenda that day. But I always train leaders, put half of your attention on the process, not just the content. So the
Right.
content would be the agenda. Okay, we're going to talk about recruiting volunteers for children's ministry and the announcements and when's the next baptism. That's the agenda of the staff meeting. Great. But half of your attention should be on, how is everyone in this room relating?
Uh-huh.
Who's speaking up? Who's never speaking up? What's going on in me? Am I mansplaining? What's my capacity to listen to someone rant before I rant back with vision? How many rooms have you been in where somebody is a yeah butter and then they get a big vision talk from the leader? That's what we call in my field an attempted solution. It's not going to change anything. So this is deep stuff, but if leaders can simply notice anxiety and pay attention to the patterns and notice what's going on in them, this for me goes all the way back to chaplaincy. The biggest surprise for me, Andy, was how much anxiety I brought into the room. Like, as the chaplain, I didn't realize I was an anxious person, but my need to say the right thing, my need to take your pain away, my feeling of, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm an incompetent fool. All of my inner narrative is coming out.
Right.
Yeah.
In a crisis moment, like the death of someone or passing, and it's just like, yeah, there's hurt, there's all kinds of emotions going. You feel like, okay, I got to rein this in. That drive, that compulsion, yeah, that's reactivity. I get it.
Yeah, the whole point of the chaplaincy program wasn't really to train you to be a chaplain at all. It was to plunge a ministry student into the most intense human situations so that
Mhm.
they could discover themselves.
Wow.
It was, I mean, I attended like 200 deaths the year I was a chaplain,
Wow.
almost a death a day. Uh,
Yeah.
you can't do that and not run into yourself. So it's called clinical pastoral education. It's the science of locating your humanity and
Hmm.
integrating it into your pastoral call. It changed my life.
Your story of your first day and that first code that you were called on, and then the thing that got me was that you said there was the charge nurse who needed the room that the patient just passed in. She needed that room. She legitimately needed it. You've got a family here that's in chaos, and she's pressuring you. So her anxiety is being thrown on you.
That's right.
You say it's contagious.
There's the contagion right there.
And so now you even feel more, okay, now I've got to take charge and have the right answer and all those things. So
I mean,
what was your response to them?
my three of those five. I need to be there when people are hurting. I need to know the answer, and I need you to like me. Those are my three on the big five. All three activated in that one call. So the nurse's need to get the room infects my need to please the nurse, and now we're off to the races, and we're just dumping and spreading anxiety at a massive rate.
But we do it every day. It happens in every one of our staff meetings. Yeah, people have conflict, people have needs and things. We're all going to run into each other. So
I
being
can't tell
able
you
to,
how many times a lot of the work I do nowadays is consulting when groups are stuck
yeah,
or when there's been some kind of moral failure in the leader, and I'll come in for cleanup and trying to look at those predictable patterns. That's what we're trying to help those people. Like, how did you get here? I know how you got here. I can help
uh-huh.
you. And everybody sees it and no one's saying it. That's my experience. I'm the
You
first one to
said
say it out loud.
you just said an attempted solution. So that's kind of what you're saying. When a group gets stuck or a staff gets stuck, one of the attempted solutions is what did you say? It's more of the same, or try harder. Explain and unpack some of that.
Yeah, an attempted solution. Once you figure out a stuck pattern and you start to see your own attempted solutions, they're always more of the same and try harder. That's the futility. So a simple example would be when my son came home from basketball practice in high school. He might have been in middle school. I need to go back and check. And he's all grumpy. He's like, "Ah, Dad, every time at practice and during the game, William's a ball hog. He never passes the ball." Typical teenage boy. And I say, "Well, what do you do about it?" That's my way of saying, "What's your attempted solution?" And he's like, "Wow, if he's not going to pass the ball to me, I'm not passing the ball to him." Well, now we know that his attempted solution is the problem.
Mhm.
The more he tries to not pass the ball, the more William's not going to pass the ball. Where you see it in leadership, if we look, it's usually easier to see it in the most extreme cases. So if we look at some of these famous moral failures, I won't name names. I don't want to kick someone, but let's just call someone Larry. Let's say that he was a Christian leader of a big organization and decades of secret behavior came out and he got fired. Well, he might be this very charismatic, gifted leader who really created this amazing global thing. Um, what you see in the board is micro adjustments.
Mm.
That's an attempted solution. So Larry misbehaves 30 years ago, and someone says, "Well, no one's perfect."
Right.
Or they say, "Well, look at all the good that God's doing." Or one of the most common ones I hear, Andy, when I walk into it, "Well, that's just Larry. That's just his way." And I'm like, really? His way is to dominate? And I, I heard I was not personally involved in this. I was in a leadership conference where the leader who ran the conference openly bragged that he could never meet with the department for months or even years, but because he's the leader, he could walk in anytime he wants and change everything. And I'm
Wow.
like, that's terrible leadership. But he was saying it as something to say this because he was trying to say I'm responsible. The buck stops with me. But I was just trying to picture those hardworking people doing whatever they're doing, and you show up with no relational capital, and you're like, this is the way it needs to be, even though they're the experts in that field. You
Mhm.
know, well, the
Behind
fact
that.
that the board and the staff let him get away with that's an attempted solution and a micro adjustment.
Right.
I work with a lot of staffs that don't feel like they have the power to confront their boss because they're like, but he's the boss. I'm like, yeah, but there's 30 of you and you're all having the same experience with him, feeling the same way, and you're good people. You're not gossiping, you're not looking to tear someone down. All you have to do is say to him again and again, we don't do that here.
Right.
That's not how we act. That's not helpful. And for most domineering leaders, they don't realize that domineering behavior is a coping mechanism that is covering their own fear and insecurity.
Right.
So
That's actually
learning
my
to
answer.
disarm is really, this is longer work, but really powerful.
Wow. And what was your son's solution, or your solution for your son, that wasn't try harder, but try, what was a different answer there?
Right. We did what's called a reversal. If William never passes the ball to you, then the next time you're on the court, and it has to be in a game, not just practice. Stakes aren't high enough. Allen Iverson told us that, right? Stakes aren't high enough. It's just practice. In a game, only ever pass to William. Don't pass to Caden. Don't pass to any other kid. Only pass to William 6 times in a row. 6 isn't really a magic number, but that's enough times to break a pattern.
Right.
And
Right.
months of stuck pattern got dissolved in 10 minutes of a game.
Wow. And it
Yeah.
totally changed their relationship, changed the whole team. That's
And they never talked about it. No one ever met with a coach. Most people use content to solve the problem. But if Andrea had talked to William, hey, you're a ball hog. No, you're a ball hog.
right.
Content doesn't. Most of the time in these stuck patterns, content is not the solution. You have to get down to the process. How are we relating? And one of you has to change the process. So if the leader's always coming in and mansplaining and visioning when you're sharing, I used to do this, Andy. Like people would say to me, we are at capacity. Well, just try harder. Here's more vision. All of these lost people. I would do that. And a friend of mine pulled me aside. He's like, Steve, I don't think you appreciate that some people just have different capacities than others.
Right.
And you think everybody has your capacity and you're exhausting your team.
Right.
Now, he gave me a gift of truth. Am I going to punish him for that, or am I going to move toward him and thank him?
Right.
That every leader has that fork in the road when people give you your blind spot.
Yeah.
And so some of our blind spots are things like that. Some of them have a moral value attached, like, I think you're drinking too much, or that thing you said to that woman, that is not okay. And now, are we going to armor up and minimize, or are we going to take responsibility and grow? That's the question for leaders.
And isn't that everything you've just been talking about? To me, that's discipleship.
It's all just
That's what being in relationship and being growing like Christ. That's what it is.
it's Jesus saying to the person who has, let's call it this, Andy. You know, the invalid at the pool of Siloam in the book of John, Jesus says to him, do you want to be well? My favorite. He's like, well, it's crossed my mind. 38 years. But here's the thing, Andy. I'm 53. I know my supermodel face does not reflect my years. I have held onto coping mechanisms for longer than that invalid. And Jesus is saying to me, do you want to be well? Do you want the freedom and peace that you are proclaiming to others but not experiencing yourself? So that when my friend says to me, I think you're wearing out your team, you don't appreciate different capacities, that to me is Jesus saying, Steve, do you want to be well? Or do you want to keep flailing your team to get more out of them?
Right.
So that's where we get into, my core belief versus my precious belief is leaders have a lot of beliefs that aren't of God.
So, yeah, I heard you say that before on a podcast. It's like that Jesus may not be your core belief. And I'm just like, what is that about? So go ahead and share some of that.
I just have, because I grew up unchurched and I'm a pastor, and I went through graduate school for theology. My love for Jesus and the Bible is all-time high in my life. My love for the local church, all-time high. I just assume that means Jesus is my deepest belief. Just assume it. Plus, if I can be frank, Andy, talk about attempted solutions and contagious anxiety. All of our church cultures reinforce that assumption.
Right.
All of the language, our music, our worship, all for Jesus I surrender, 100%, all in, sold out. We use all this language.
Yeah.
It's not true. And what's true is I have beliefs about myself and the world that are deeper and more core than my belief in Jesus. So what I discovered, and this helped me a ton, is Jesus is in fact not my deepest belief. He is my most precious belief. That's true. Jesus is more precious to me than anything in this world. But if I'm not careful, I have these conscious and subconscious beliefs that infect and get in the way. So for a classic leader, um, if things aren't growing, I'm a failure. Something's wrong. Well, that's not true automatically. Maybe there is something that is wrong, but it's not automatically true. But most leaders I work with feel this incredible pressure to be successful.
Mhm.
Well, that's a core belief, and it's counterproductive to the belief in Jesus. It gets in the way. Now, one of my subconscious beliefs that I started working on in 2016, this has been 9 years. It took me a while to dig down and find it, but I kept digging, digging, digging. Here's what happened for me, Andy. I got tired of proclaiming a gospel I wasn't experiencing.
Mm.
I proclaiming God's love, I wasn't experiencing God's love. Proclaiming freedom, I wasn't free. I'm like, enough of this. What's going on? So I kept digging into my core beliefs, and my subconscious belief is I'm not worth loving.
Okay.
And a lot of leaders get into Christian leadership out of some kind of a dysfunctional wound, and that's okay. It's
Yeah.
God redeems, or God heals and redeems all. But that was pretty arresting for me. It took me till I think 2016, 2017 when I located, oh, no wonder I struggled to experience God's love. I struggled to relax into God because
Okay.
my deeper belief is I'm not worth God's time.
Mhm.
I don't want to bother anybody. No wonder I always rush in and save the day. If I can make myself essential to you, then you will like me. Pretty, pretty twisted.
Mhm.
Well, now I have something to die to and experience a depth of God's love that transforms my life. So that's what I mean by that.
All right. So I'm trying to put it all together as far as you said, relaxing into God's grace. And but first, you have to be aware of your what you're doing with those things, digging in and discovering what those core beliefs may be, and then yeah, what is it to relax into God's grace? What are you saying there?
It is it is figuring out what am I depending on when I'm not depending on Jesus,
Mm,
and how do I stand down. To me, it's First John 3:19 and 20. I think that's the best passage for this work. It's John says, he says, this is how we know we belong to the truth and how we can set our hearts at rest in God's presence. Even when our hearts condemn us, God is greater than our hearts and he knows everything.
yeah.
I find that to be unbelievable that, like, when we're kids, it's pretty vulnerable. We don't have the power we need to navigate an adult world. We get
Mhm.
hurt. Even if you had very loving parents, this is not about mum and dad and whether you maybe had an abusive childhood. I would not call my childhood abusive.
Right.
It just was difficult. Whether you had an abusive childhood or whether you had very loving, warm, you still had lack as a kid. You made agreements with yourself to navigate into adulthood
Hmm.
because being vulnerable is terrifying. Well, there's nothing more vulnerable than standing in God's presence. The 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 sovereign God of the universe, I am as that is as exposing as it gets. So what our heart does is it reverts to coping mechanisms to protect us from God's condemnation. I think, Andy, I think fundamentally we tend to believe God is Zeus. It's hard to believe that God is love.
Oh
So
wow.
that when we're in God's presence, like according to John, our heart condemns us to get it over with before God can condemn us.
Mm,
See if this helps. Years ago, I laid hardwood in my house. I'd never laid hardwood before, and I'm not naturally handy, and I'm not a perfectionist. And I did a very good job. I took a long time with that first plank to set it true to the house, but still, my house it was a difficult installation. I had to wrap around a hallway to where the last plank was in the middle of a hallway, pretty public. I couldn't hide the last plank in a corner. And the gap for the last plank was a rhombus. It was not a rectangle. It was off by like 3/8 of an inch, not quite half an inch. I had to cut a rhombus shaped plank, stick it in the middle of the hallway. Okay, that's my hard. Now, it looked beautiful, but that one plank showed that it wasn't perfect. I don't know if I didn't do it right or if the house wasn't true. I don't know. What I know is every time people came over for the next 6 months, Steve, look at this beautiful flooring. Did you do that? Yeah, I did that. Well done. Well, let me show you the rhombus. I'd walk them over to the rhombus
Yeah.
because better to condemn myself than them to leave and talk about me when I'm not in the room saying,
Oh, yeah.
Steve, look at that mistake. I think that's what John's getting at in First John.
And we do
I
that
think we
together.
get into God's presence and our coping mechanisms show up to protect us. They're well-meaning. We have to teach them that they can stand down in God's presence. We are safe in God's presence. We are loved. And
Mhm.
that's how I think we relax into God's freedom and peace. So it's an exercise of faith of I'm gonna count on God for my freedom, peace, and love rather than on myself. I'm gonna stand down my coping mechanisms. So I try to practice that a number of times a day.
I've been practicing some of those things for the last 6 months or so, and it's made a huge difference in my life. Um, just simple things of being aware of God's already in the meeting. He's already there. I'm not bringing him into it. He's already there. I'm just
Yeah,
becoming aware. So
yeah,
just slowing down enough to recognize God's presence, to recognize that he's God, I'm not. I don't have to be. So just a lot of helpful things. So I appreciate you, your time, your work, what you're doing, and so they can connect with you. In what ways? Give me that list.
yeah. If they just go, they can go to stevecusswords.com. And
Steve
that's
Cuss
probably the
Words.
one place to get my books, my podcast. We have courses. They can have me come in and speak if they want.
Awesome.
Stevecusswords.com be the way to go.
Okay. Well, thank you again very much for your time and just what you're doing, and I appreciate you being a friend to the Advantage and to pastors all across the country. So thank
My pleasure, Andy. It was a great chat.
you. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Advantage Podcast with David Ashcraft and for participating in our goal to strengthen and encourage pastors and their churches so more people are introduced to Jesus across Pennsylvania. If you found this helpful, feel free to pass it along. To find out more about the work of the Advantage, visit our website at theadvantage.org.